We are continuing and probably concluding these fundamentals for the Sunni intellectual. And we're going to start with the next pointer for your intellect. The author says, likeness depends on interchangeability. That means likeness depends on substitutability, interchangeability. If you can interchange two things or substitute one thing for another thing, then this is what proves likeness between them. If you can't interchange them, then they are unlike each other in whatever way they can't replace each other. So, for example, if the condition is for something to have a beginning, then you would be like a stone. The stone has a beginning also. So in that regard, you and that stone, you are similar. But if the condition is being alive, then you and that stone are not similar. If the condition is being alive, then you and an animal are similar. But if the condition is having a mind, then you and the animal are not similar. So likeness depends on interchangeability. This is the strong saying. As opposed to saying likeness is confirmed by two things being exactly identical. This is not a strong saying. So if two things are alike, whatever could happen to one could happen to the other. So then that's the argument then, that Allah is unlike anything. Because had he been like something, then whatever could happen to his likeness could happen to him. So then, in that same realm, what are two different things? Two different things can validly depart from each other or depart each other in existence, non-existence, time, or place. Two different things can validly depart each other in existence, non-existence, time, or place. I think that's clear. But you might wonder, what does that matter? What does it matter what two different things are? That relates to something that's coming up right now. So the next pointer is that the mind has three limits. And that statement there does not mean only three limits. If someone asks you, do you have one finger? Then you should say yes. You shouldn't say no because you have 10 fingers. You should say yes, I do have one finger because I have 10 fingers. So for sure I have one. When the Prophet ﷺ said that 7 types of people will be shaded under the shade of the Arsh on Judgment Day, that doesn't mean that there's not others. The mind has 3 limits. So what's a limit? A limit is as far as you can go. So there are 3 cases here that you can't go further than these 3 cases in your mind, not without blundering. The first one is that God is not his attributes, nor is he something else. He is neither his attributes nor something else. That's 2 simultaneous negations. Had he been his attributes, then that would mean that he is knowledge and he is power, etc. That's not valid. And I'm going to keep this brief here. And had he been something else, then it would be valid that his self departs his attributes, or that his attributes depart his self. And that's not valid. And that doesn't mean that his attributes are parts of his self. His attributes are not parts of his self. They're not pieces. They're not segments. They're not in him. Or or there's other statements also we could say. Rather, his attributes exist by his existence. He is a self, or he is a being, one with confirmed existence. And this being, this real being, has real attributes. And his attributes are not pieces or parts or segments. They're not part of him. They're not separate from him. They're not connected to him. They're not disconnected from him. They're not dwelling in him, etc., etc., etc. If you want to think about God being attributed with his attributes, and you think about this issue properly, then the furthest you're going to get, and then you have to stop, is to say, God is not his attributes, nor is he something else. If you have a question, feel free. But we've had lessons about that before. And if we want to elaborate on that statement, we can dedicate an entire lesson to elaborate on that statement. Some of the opponents of Ahlus Sunnah thought that this statement is an explicit contradiction. When they heard that God is not his attributes, nor is he something else, they said, those Ash'aris have fallen into explicit contradiction. It's not the case. There's no contradiction in these two negations here. And the second limit for your mind is conceiving. You said, so we say that his attributes are existent by his existence? Yes. That's the meaning of when the Shaykh says, hiya qa'imatun bi dhatihi. And he explains in Arabic that means qa'imatun bi dhatihi means thabitatun li dhatihi. But what's the meaning of qa'ima and thabita mawjuda? That's what those two words mean, which mean existing. So, inshallah, that's clear for you. The second limit of the mind here is the living creature is compelled to choose. Compelled to choose. What's compulsion? Compulsion is not having a choice. What's choice? Choice is not being compelled. The living creature is compelled to choose. This statement right here, if you think about destiny properly, then this is as far as your mind can get. You have to stop here. Some people, they think about destiny, so they think, we must be compelled. Everything is destiny. That's how they understand destiny. Destiny is unavoidable. It's inevitable. We must be compelled then. Whatever Allah willed to be shall be. Whatever he did not will to be shall not be. We don't have control, really. And others, they would say, we choose. We witness it. If I choose to stand up now, I'll stand. Or if I choose to sit, I'll sit. We do choose. So what's right is that you can't deny either of those. You can't deny the choice of the slave. That's blasphemy. And you can't deny that Allah is in control of everything. And nothing happens but what he willed. That's blasphemy too. So how do you put those together? You put those together by saying that you are compelled to choose. If you want to test that in yourself, then just wake up tomorrow and try not to choose doing something. You won't be able to. And the third limit for the mind here is what Imam Al-Rifa'i rahimahullah said. غاية المعرفة بالله الإيقان بوجوده تعالى بلا كيف ولا مكان. The extent of knowing God, meaning the furthest your mind can reach in terms of comprehending God's existence, is conceiving that God exists without a how and without a place. Without a how means he has no mode and no manner of being, no form, no shape. If you can conceive that, that's actually profound conception. And he exists without a place. If you can conceive that properly, you understand that, then this is profound comprehension. And your mind can't go further. The next pointer is the validator of visibility is existence, not createdness. What does that mean? The validator of visibility is existence. Now we're talking about seeing something. What makes something seeable or visible? The people of the truth said what makes it seeable is its existence only, not its place. It's not the fact that it's in a place that makes you see it, and not that it has a body, not that it has a color or a shape, that's why you see it. And it's not because it's created that's why you see it. The reason you see something is because it exists. The validator of visibility is existence. So someone might say, when he knows that you believe that Allah exists without a place, he would say, you believe that Allah exists without a place? Don't you believe that you could see Allah? So the answer is yes, you could see Allah if he enabled you to see him. So he's saying to you, how could you see him if he's not anywhere? That doesn't make any sense. That's his own crippled mind saying that this doesn't make any sense. It does make sense. But he doesn't realize that what he's really saying is, how can you confirm something that you can't imagine? That's really what he's... But he doesn't... he lacks self-awareness here. So instead of saying, how can you confirm something that you can't imagine? How can you confirm seeing something without being able to imagine it? Instead of saying it that way, he says, how can you say that you could see Allah if he exists without a place? So that person thinks that, for example, if he's seeing you, or you're seeing your computer in front of you, for example, he thinks that you see that thing because it's in a place. You do not see anything that you see, anything that's in a place, you don't see it because it's in a place. Rather, you see it as it is. Instead of thinking that you see it because it's in a place, what's true is that you just see it as it is. That means you see it because it exists, and it happens to be something that's in a place. So you're not seeing it because it's in a place. Rather, you're just seeing it as it is. So when you see Allah in the afterlife, if you die as a believer, then you'll see Allah. If you don't die as a believer, you'll never see God. If you die as a believer and then you see God in the afterlife, you will see him without him being in a place, because he exists. So someone says, how could you see him? He's not in a place. You say to him, because you see him as he is. You will see him. You don't see something because it's in a place. That's what he doesn't understand. Rather, you see something because it exists. So when you see something, you just see it as it is. So if you saw God, you're going to see him, without a place. Because place is not the reason you see something anyway. The thing that you do see in a place, you don't see it because it's in a place. So you can see the one who exists without a place. So the validator of visibility is existence, not createdness. And it's not impossible to see creations while seeing God. Meaning, some scholars said, if you saw God in the afterlife, you won't see any creation while seeing him. Some scholars said, if you saw Allah in the afterlife, you won't see any creation while you see God. Others, they said, this is not a condition. It's not impossible to see creations while seeing God. Now I just repeated. Did you get what you wanted me to repeat? Okay. So that one too, we're not going far there. Now the next pointer. The Maturidiyyah, that's a group of Sunni Muslims in the Aqidah. You know them. They said that Allah is a doer in eternity with an eternal doing. They said God is a doer in eternity. Yani, he's a doer without a beginning. And without a beginning, he has an eternal doing. So you can say that God is a doer in eternity, attributed with an eternal doing. Doing means an attribute. An eternal doing means an attribute, not a created thing, not an eternal created thing. No, that's impossible. The doing is the attribute of God. What they're saying is Allah has an attribute in eternity. So what's this attribute in eternity? It's called doing, fi'l. And therefore, in eternity, he's fa'il, doer. That doesn't mean there was a done thing, though. He was the doer when there wasn't anything done. So he was the creator and there wasn't any creation. And he was the Lord and there wasn't any subject. And he was the resurrector and there wasn't even anything that died yet, so that he could bring it back to life. Yani. There wasn't even anything that was given life and then died so that he could bring it back to life. He was resurrector without that. Okay. So that's that. And our Shaykh teaches us that this is the best way. And the Ash'aris said that Allah eternally had power to do something. So that statement means something else. It's a different statement. Has a different meaning. But you might not perceive the difference between those two statements. The Ash'aris said that Allah eternally had power to do something. The Maturidiyyah said Allah is a doer in eternity with an eternal doing. The Ash'aris said that Allah eternally had power to do something. That means something else. So you can teach people like that. You can say that Allah had the power in eternity to create. It's not haram to teach this way, to say this way. So the Ash'aris, they said Allah eternally had power to do something. They said, and he's not called a doer before a done thing existed, though. He's not a doer before a done thing existed. So that shows you right there, they're not saying the same thing. Not exactly. According to them, he's not a doer without a done thing. The Maturidiyyahs are saying, yes, he is. He is a doer without a done thing. He's a doer because he has a doing. The Ash'aris are saying, we're not going to say he has a doing if there wasn't anything done. So the Ash'aris are saying, so rather we want to say he had power in eternity to do something. So that's two ways right there. It's not my intent here to go deep into the back and forth between these two sayings. So if you have any question, go ahead. So how would I explain the saying of the Ash'aris? Well, I'll say it like this. The Ash'aris are saying Allah has an eternal attribute called power. And yes, when something is related to his power, that's called ta'alluq. If its existence is related to his power, then this thing will come into existence. So that's what the Ash'aris are saying. If its lastingness is related to his power, then it will remain in existence as long as he willed for it to last. This is what the Ash'aris are saying. The Maturidiyyahs are saying, well, yeah, he does have power, but he also has a doing that's eternal, an eternal doing. And those mean two different things. They don't mean the same thing. The Maturidiyyahs are saying he's a doer with an eternal doing doesn't exactly mean that he has the power to do something eternally. It means something else. Nah. Okay, so in those two sayings, there's no sin in taking either of those two sayings. And I just told you which one our sheikh says is the stronger one. The one we started with. Okay, let me answer this question real quick before I continue. He said, so saying that Allah has eternal doing negates the understanding or belief that Allah changes? Yes, it does. Because whatever is eternal doesn't change. Now, the next pointer is a rule, which is the implication of one's opinion is his opinion if it is obvious. This is important. With this rule, you're not going to let somebody double talk you. And with this rule, you're going to stand your ground when you need to. The implication of one's opinion is his opinion if it is obvious. What does implication mean? Implication means what you're not saying. That's why this rule is important. And if a person is really a big gaslighter, as they say, then he's going to blame you for taking this rule. He's going to blame you for not allowing him to double talk you and not allowing him to gaslight you. Because there's something he's not saying and you're holding him to it. The implication of one's opinion is his opinion if it is obvious. So this case is called in Arabic lazimul madhab. That's the name of the broad case. The implication of one's opinion, that's the name of the broad case. Lazimul madhab. And the scholars have some different statements here. And out of those statements, this one is the best one. So according to this rule here, then, saying that God takes a seat means that the speaker is an anthropomorphist. Anthropomorphist means a bodifier of God, someone who personifies God, gives him the attributes of bodies and humans. If he says God takes a seat, then he's an anthropomorphist. Even if he says, we don't know how he takes a seat, and even if he says, I didn't say he's a body, you say to him, but when you say he takes a seat, it means he's a body, even if you don't say it. So then he might argue with you for sticking to this implication here and say that you are accusing him unrightfully. You're not accusing him unrightfully. So saying that God takes a seat means that the speaker is an anthropomorphist, because that's obvious. That implication is obvious. And saying that God is a knower without knowledge means that the speaker is an atheist. So you'd think he wasn't an atheist because he said there's a God. And because he said God is a knower. But when he said he's a knower without knowledge means really he's an atheist. There's different types of atheists, by the way. He's an atheist by his implication, Because the implication is that God doesn't have attributes. If he doesn't have attributes, it means he doesn't exist. How would he exist if he doesn't have attributes? Doesn't make sense. If he's a knower without knowledge, then means he's a hearer without hearing, he's a seer without sight, he's a speaker without speech, etc., etc. It means he doesn't have any attributes. So how would he exist if he doesn't have attributes? Doesn't make sense. And the Mu'tazila, they even said, not only he doesn't have attributes, he didn't have any name either in eternity. They say God doesn't have any real attribute in eternity, and he doesn't have a name in eternity. This is atheism. So they say he has no, basically, there's no way to mention him. He has no attribute, he has no description, and he has no mentioning in eternity. No name in eternity. This is atheism. So when you learn this knowledge and you learn a rule like this, then people like that, they won't be able to double talk you. Those ones are dangerous for the layman, because laymen don't pick up some things like that. So this is a nice booklet for you as a layman, because it helps you to understand some things. But one is not necessarily an atheist if he says that seeing God is impossible. Because saying that seeing God is impossible, its implication is atheism. Because we just said, what makes something visible is what? Its existence. So if it's impossible to see God, that means he doesn't exist. So that's atheism. But that conclusion is not obvious. So some people, they do believe God exists, and they believe that seeing him is impossible because they think that the only reason you see something is because it's in a place. And they said he's not in a place. He's not a body or a shape or a form. So seeing him is impossible. So they were mistaken there. We say to them, you don't see something because it's in a place. You don't see something because it's a shape or a form. Things, we say to them, the things you are denying from God, such as shape, form, etc., although that's true, those aren't the reason you see something anyway. So it's not impossible to see God, so you see why this one's not obvious. The implication, which is atheism, in this case is not obvious. This person here has a confusion. So the implication of one's opinion is his opinion if that implication is obvious. And you said the definition of an atheist is one who denies the essence, attribute, or action of Allah or denies them all. An atheist is one who denies God's existence. But sometimes the denial of God's existence is implied. It's insinuated. Some people deny God's existence indirectly. Just like how, don't you know how some people, they say there's only one God and we say they're pagans anyway? Yes. Why we say they're pagans, even though they say out their own mouth there's only one God? Because they say other things that the implication of what they say confirms paganism. Like they believe that God is in a place or a direction, or he has a body, or that he changes. So they said God is not like the creation, and God is one, and we still said they're pagans. Not only the paganism is implied, so therefore it's paganism. No, no, no. If you came to that, means you did not understand the rule I'm giving you. It's worded right there. If it is obvious, the implication of one's opinion is his opinion if the implication is obvious. So don't say the paganism is implied, so therefore it's paganism. You say the paganism is, if the paganism is obviously implied, then it is confirmed paganism. The implication of one's opinion is his opinion if it's an obvious implication, not an obscure one. This one, sometimes you need to have good understanding of some things to be able to apply this properly. Yes, go ahead. About the last matter, about the denial of seeing God. Yes? Why is it not obvious? Because the person doesn't know the reason what makes uh, seeing something valid. Well, no, he missed something. He has a mistake. He has a confusion. He doesn't know what makes seeing something valid. He has a weakness in his mind. He thinks the reason you see something is because it's in a place and because it's a body. Or he thinks the reason you see something is because it's created. So he doesn't know what's the reason you see something in the first place. So when he was right about denying that Allah has a body, denying that Allah is in a place, But he was wrong because he thought that this was the reason you see something. Then he thought that it's impossible to see Allah. So he's mistaken here. And it's not obvious that he's committing atheism. Yani, for someone like him, it's not obvious. For someone like him, it's not obvious. It's obvious to you now because you've studied and you've learned and you got strengthened in these issues. So then these implications stand out to you more obviously. He said, and the former also have weakness in their mind. The one who's the anthropomorphist and the atheist, not the same though. It's not the same because saying God takes a seat means the speaker is an anthropomorphist. So, if someone believes that Allah takes a seat, and then he says, I'm not saying he's a body. So what's this person's case? Either he is really stupid, so then it's weakness of his mind, or he's a scoundrel, so it's not that same kind of weakness. Now it's mischief. He has a mischief in his heart. Same thing about the other one. Saying that God is a knower without knowledge. Either he is a stupid person, like for example, he's repeating something other people said, for example. He doesn't know what he's saying. Or he's a scoundrel. He knows actually what he's saying to you. He knows what he's saying to you. So it's not the same kind of weakness. So then what it is a mischief. He's an evil person. He's mudlil, a misguider. He said, is it obscure to state that Zionists worship Iblis because they explicitly do all of the bidding of Iblis and explicitly bid the unlawful and forbid the lawful? I say the question itself is obscure, and I don't want to go into that. Okay, if there's no other question there, let's move on. Ameen wa fikum. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Now, don't take this rule now and then you can start trying to find all kinds of ways to say, is this kufr, is this kufr, is this kufr? If that's the case, I will erase this rule right out of the book. Khalas. Take the examples I gave you, think about them and study them. Don't ask me any questions about blasphemy here. Barakallahu fikum. The next pointer is that authentic statements that seem contradictory must be reconciled as much as possible. We talked about that. Remember, before you jump to say these two are contradictory, you need to consider if each one has its own context. If each one has its own context, then they're not really contradictory. They only seem to be. This is why we say that Allah exists without a place. And this is why we say that there are good innovations. Why we say Allah exists without a place? Because if one ayah says, if you translated it literally, one ayah would say, He's over the throne. And another one would say, He's with you wherever you are. And another one would say, He's closer to you than your jugular vein. And another one would say, He's in the sky. And another one would say, He surrounds everything. So how can you put those together? One way you could put those together is to say, all of these together prove that He's not in any place. If He was in any one of these places, then He wouldn't be in any of the other ones. And then there would be a contradiction. But if we say He's not in any of them, then there's no contradiction. And then we have to explain each one by one. And this is why we say there are good innovations. Because although there's a hadith that says, وَكُلُّ بِدْعَةٍ ضَلَالَةٍ, every innovation is misguidance. There's a hadith that says, مَنْ سَنَّ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ سُنَّةً حَسَنَةً فَلَهُ أَجْرُهَا. Anyone who starts a good sunnah in Islam has its reward. So, if you don't put those together, that means there's a contradiction. By saying that whoever starts a good sunnah in Islam has its reward, and every innovation in Islam is misguidance if it contradicts the rules of the religion. Not absolutely, because Whoever starts a good way in Islam will have its reward. But if every innovation, without exception, is misguidance, then there wouldn't be any way for someone to start a good way in Islam and have its reward. Okay? The next rule is a rule depends on the generality of the text, not its reason. This is the rule from scholars of Usul al-Fiqh. This one is important for you so that you don't let someone misinterpret something. Like, you don't let a hadith denier get away with denying the hadiths. And then every time you tell him something from the Quran that proves that there are hadiths, anything from the Quran that proves the hadiths of the Prophet, he would tell you, no, doesn't work. For example, if he says to you, give me one ayah from the Quran that proves that you should take the hadiths of the Prophet. So you told him that Allah Ta'ala says, وَمَا آتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ. Whatever the messenger has given you, then take it. They will say, this ayah doesn't prove the hadiths. This ayah is about the distribution of war spoils. Where is that ayah? Now I don't remember where the ayah is. Maybe someone can tell us before the lesson's over. The brother said Surah Al-Hashr. So he would say, this doesn't prove that you can take hadiths or that you should take hadiths. This ayah is about war spoils. The Prophet ﷺ was distributing spoils of war, and there was some issue about his distribution. So Allah says, وَمَا آتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ. Whatever the messenger gave you, then take it. وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا. And whatever he forbade you from, then refrain from it. So what do you say to that hadith denier? You say to him, number one, how did you know that this ayah is about the distribution of the spoils of war without taking it from any hadith? And number two, there's a rule. The rule that's taken out of the ayah or the hadith depends on the generality of the text, not its reason. Yes, that's true. The reason for the ayah, the story that is behind the ayah being revealed, was related to the Prophet's distribution of war spoils. That's true. We knew that from the hadiths. But that reason doesn't restrict the words of the ayah itself. The words of the ayah are actually broader than the reason the ayah was revealed. Because it says, ma, whatever, or anything. وَمَا آتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ. Anything the messenger gave you, whatever the messenger gave you, فَخُذُوهُ, then take it. So it's not restricted to the war spoils, although that was the reason for the ayah to be revealed. Or I'll give you another example. The hadith we just mentioned. مَنْ سَنَّ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ سُنَّةً حَسَنَةً. Anyone who starts in Islam a good sunnah, فَلَهُ أَجْرُهَا, then he has its reward. So what would a Wahhabi say since he doesn't believe in good innovations? They say, this hadith, that's not for everybody. This hadith is for the Sahaba only. And then he'll tell you the story. He will say, don't you know the story behind this hadith, why the Prophet said it? He would say, if you knew the reason the Prophet said it, then you wouldn't be saying what you're saying. He's gaslighting you right there. He's going to say, the reason the Prophet said it is because, and then he'll tell you the story. So then you say to him, La, this is not true. Yeah, that's the reason he said it. That's true. But what you're saying, your attempt to restrict the hadith to the Sahaba is not true. Because the words of the hadith are broader than your restriction. The hadith itself says, men, whoever, sanna fil Islam, whoever paves a good path in Islam, falahu ajruha, then he will have its reward. So, al-ibratu bi'umumi lafz, the regard is given to the generality of the wording, la bi khususi sabab, not for the reason the wording was put forth. So you might find that rule handy there. And any condition that's not taken from God's book is invalid. This is very important also, because the person will just give you conditions. You say, no, you can't do that because you have to do this and do that. And because this is missing and that's missing. You don't have this, you don't have that. You say, where do you get all these conditions from? Do you have an ayat that tells you about these conditions? Do you have any hadith that prove these conditions? No? Well, كل شرط ليس في كتاب الله فهو باطل. The Prophet said, every condition that's not from God's book is invalid. وإن كان مئة شرط. وإن كان مئة شرط. Even if it was 100 conditions. That's going to help you too. You'll be talking to somebody who has no idea what he's talking about. And he swears up and down that what you're doing is invalid, for example, because of some conditions. Or he swears up and down that what he's doing is right because of his conditions. So where'd you even get these conditions from? Like in the case of Qibla. He'll say, no, you got to face northeast because the earth is round. So where'd you even get this condition from? Who told you that's a condition? He would say, well, it's not flat. So well, whatever. Where did you get the condition from? And he's going to think you're a moron. He said, isn't the Quran itself a proof for the validity of hadith, since the hadith informs us that the companions compiled the Quran? Yeah, you're on the right track there. Yani, you say to a hadith denier who claims he only wants the Quran, tell him, basically, your argument is this: the Quran is transmitted like the hadiths are transmitted. The Quran is itself transmitted like the hadiths are transmitted. So what's he going to say? He's going to say, but the Quran is mutawatir. So what do you say to him? Tell him where you learned about mutawatir from. You didn't get it from the kuffar. They don't have ilm al-hadith. So he might try to lie to you and tell you, no, the kuffar talked about tawatur too. So then what do you say to him? Tell him, show me your reference. And now, don't let him say anything but show you his reference. Don't let him get away from there. He's going to keep talking until you're not asking him for his reference anymore. And then he's never going to stop talking. And he doesn't have any reference. So where do you know about mutawatir from in the first place? You know it from ilm al-hadith. What are you doing studying ilm al-hadith for? He said, what does a condition mean in the hadith? Condition is like saying, you know the conditions, like wudu is a condition for prayer, right? And also facing the qibla is a condition for prayer. And for example, using pure and purifying water is a condition for wudu. Using pure and purifying water is a condition for wudu. So that's what the conditions are. So someone will say to you, you should face northeast in the United States and Canada because the earth is round. You say to him, where you got that condition from? Then he's going to tell you. You can ask any pilot. This is recently. I was going to maybe make a video out of it, but I decided not to. Someone sent me this talk. So you can ask any pilot. I told him, tell me the name of the pilot you asked. That's why you can't be afraid to ask a person for his reference. He's trying to gaslight me. He said, you can ask any pilot. I told him, tell me the name of the pilot you asked. He said, his name is Bob. Are you happy? Look how disrespectful this guy is. So now, do I even believe that you ever talked to any pilot? Of course not. And if I call you a liar, you're going to sit there and act like I'm a bad person because I'm not letting you gaslight me? I'm not letting you take me for a ride here? You're a liar. You don't know that I didn't talk to a pilot named Bob? Okay, give me Bob's information so that we can contact him and verify it like you did. He never got back to me, of course. Nah. So, now the next pointer for your mind, this is some advice. Rely on God. You have reliance on God. It will decrease your anxiety. The more reliance on God you have, the less anxiety you will have, the less worry you will have. If you don't have worry, you don't have anxiety, you can think clearly. And if you have panic attacks, by the way, if you're someone who gets anxiety and you suffer from panic attacks, then what should you do? When you suffer from the panic attack, then you need to keep a grip on yourself. And you need to detach your mind from your heart rate. Detach your mind from your heart rate. I mean by that, when you have a panic attack and your heart starts racing, then if you don't stay snappy, then you're not going to think well because you're panicking. Now you're panicking. So your mind is scattered. But what should you do then? Realize that you're panicking and detach yourself. Take a step back and look and say, look at that. There's my heartbeat racing there. And that heartbeat racing there makes me fidgety. I might want to even run right now. I don't feel relaxed. But I need to keep my composure. And I need to relax. And I need to let my heart calm down. And I need to not let my thoughts get carried away with the adrenaline. And take some slow breaths. And maybe sit down if you need to. And let your heart slow back down, which might take few moments. And then, inshallah, like that, you'll think better, get through some issue better. Be patient. Yani, be patient means detain yourself. And here also means be slow. Slow means don't make decisions fast. Some people make decisions so fast. Why? That's how Allah made them, I guess. You need to think. Give yourself some time. Don't rush for no reason. And the devil will incite you to rush. Don't let the devil incite you to rush. One time we were at the graveyard and the brother needed to be buried in the proper direction. And we had to just do some things to get him turned in the right direction. It was taking some extra time. So while we were involved in that, one of the brothers, he said, come on, we got to hurry up and get this done. You know? I mean, we can't, something like this. So for some reason, he thought that's the thing to say. Why? Maybe that's the whisper of the devil. So the devil inspired him with something, and then he said what crossed his mind. Or maybe that's how he thinks about things. And mashallah, so when he said that, I said to him, we don't have to rush here. We need to make sure that we do this properly and get it done right. So then he said, yeah, you're right. And maybe if nobody had said anything right there, then they would have started rushing, and then who knows what would have happened. And do not be quick to anger. Exalt the religion. It's good for your mind. Love the pious. Don't have bad, don't have ill will towards the good Muslims. It's not a good idea. And seek counsel. Yani, sometimes you want to talk to some of the brothers or sisters who have some sense so that you can get some other perspectives. Do plenty of teaching while fasting. So teaching is good and fasting is good. Do both of those together. Very nice for your heart. I don't know anything that feels like this. Teaching while fasting. And study frequently. Keeps your mind sharp. Excuse me. And keeps your knowledge fresh. Keeps your details fresh. You know what studying frequently is like? Studying frequently is like always cleaning your house. Always sweeping. Always. What if you sweep your house every single day? Every single day. What if you sweep your house twice per day? It's going to be, there's no dust anywhere. You're not going to be dusty there. Like that if you study frequently, like every day. If you don't study, it's going to be like if you don't sweep your house. It's going to get dusty. Yani, if you don't sweep your house every day. And exercise. This is good for you. It's good for your mind, good for your body. And live without luxury. Bread and water are the food of the scholar. Al-khubz wal-ma' ta'amul ulama. Rhymes in Arabic, it almost rhymes in English. Bread and water are the food of the scholar. Avoid the sins of the heart that cloud your judgment, like insincerity, being a show-off. You're concerned about what people think about you in your worships and in your good deeds. This clouds your judgment. You're not thinking well. You're distracted here. And arrogance, which is thinking you're better than others. And conceit, which is you're being impressed with yourself. You're distracted here. You're thinking about yourself. Oh, I'm so good at this. I pray so much. I pray so good. I give lessons so nice. I recite Quran so well. Everybody likes me because how good I am. You're distracted here. And the envy, which is you're hating someone else's endowment. You're distracted here. You're saying, why she married him? Why he married her? How'd he get that? I ain't think he'd have shot. Why are you worried about anything like that? And avoid all sins, including magic. These things bad for you. Magic's bad for your heart. And repent frequently. Repentance polishes the heart. Consume only what is lawful, and do not listen to forbidden instruments. Consume only what is lawful, because unlawful food makes your heart hard. And don't listen to the forbidden instruments, clutters your mind. And turn your vision from what is forbidden to gaze upon. And remember death frequently. The next pointer is consider being silent in 10 cases. Being silent means you're not giving an opinion or saying a rule or something like that. Now you're holding your tongue because you want to be accurate always and you want to be in tip-top shape when you're speaking and giving answers and things like that. So consider being silent in 10 cases. While drowsy, and you're sleepy, somebody wants to ask you a question, tell them, I'm sleepy now. I can't answer you. Fighting the urge to relieve yourself, that means you have to go to the bathroom. So someone wants your opinion. Tell them, let me use the bathroom first, then I'll listen to you. Or while angry, or while sick, because you're distracted now. Or hungry, or thirsty, or aroused, or depressed, or ecstatic. Ecstatic means so happy, extremely happy, too happy. So happy you're not concentrating, for example. And when extremely hot or cold. The wise one is the one who correctly estimates outcomes and acts accordingly. Estimate outcomes means he looks ahead. And he acts accordingly so that he gets premium results. He's the wise one. When everything comes into fruition at the end, he says, mashallah, I got what I was trying to get. Allah enabled me to be wise once again. Sometimes you're going to not get what you wanted, and you say, I wasn't wise this time. If that were due to your miscalculation, that's what I mean. If it's because of your miscalculation there, because you said to yourself, I should do it this way, I'm not going to. And then when something doesn't work, you say, oh no, I should have did it that way. Wasn't wise this time. The fool does not estimate, or he does not act accordingly. And the fool wants to help, but makes things worse. This is very important, because you don't want to be the fool, and you don't want to be around the fool. That's very important. It's not a mean thing, because fools are harmful. So you might know somebody's a fool, like, let me say, you might reckon that someone is a fool because of your experience, because you had enough sense by Allah's help. And you say, this guy here, I am now convinced that he's a fool. And then you will be weary of him. Thing about a fool, though, he might not be malicious. If he's not malicious, though, he's still harmful. Or he could be. And the friend is who is happy for your happiness and sad for your sadness. And the enemy is who is happy for your sadness and sad for your happiness. Why that's there? Because your company is important matter. Your company rubs off on you, and you rub off on your company. So you want to be around your friends and your beloveds and your trustees. You don't want to be around your enemies and your haters. Anyone who does not fear for himself will not fear for others. Very important. You notice what somebody does to himself or for himself, then keep that in mind, because if that's his regard for his own self, what's his regard for you? And that completes this humble compilation. Yani, until now, I exerted myself here. I couldn't. Yani, I thought and thought, and I opened the file and reopened it and closed it and reopened it one day, another day, anything else, anything else. So maybe something might occur to me, but until now, this is what I could think to put in here. So that completes this humble compilation. May Allah have mercy on who improves it or explains it. Subhanallahi wa bihamdi. What crosses my mind is for us to review this before we move on to a new book. Crosses my mind to review this, just to read through it quickly one time. Inshallah, that would be good, and then you can catch anything that I added, and you can review. And if you have some questions, you can ask your questions. If I tell you which book I want to do next, you might tell me, okay, let's start that and let's not review next week.
No, actually, the review was very well. I love that idea.
What do I recommend if the fiqh lessons are not sticking? I recommend assessing the level of those lessons. If they are too high, then let the person retire from those if they're too high and go to lessons of a lower level until he gets firm there, and then he can go back up again. If it's already not high level and the fiqh is not sticking, then I suggest that the person just keeps repeating and has to memorize. I say this person who's saying it's not sticking, let him not give up as long as he hasn't tried to memorize his text. Memorize means word for word, verbatim, exactly the way it's written on the page. Not general meaning, not reworded, paraphrased. If he memorizes that, even in English, yeah. If he memorizes that and he still says, it's not sticking, there's nothing I can, then after that, let him ask again, and then we'll see. But that means he has to be prepared to do tasmi'. Tasmi' means he has to be prepared to recite from memory what he has memorized without looking. I mean, what iyakum. Some people, they ask me, what do you think I should do for this? I would say, do such and such. And then they don't do it. And then they come back and they start asking questions that had they did what I told them to do, and the only reason I told them to do is because they asked me, then they wouldn't even have the question they're asking. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك